Hey everyone, welcome to the second part of the music theory series. Now that we know the names of all the intervals, which we learned about in the previous episode, there's a link somewhere on the screen, we're ready to move on to talking about scales. The simplest way of thinking about scales is that it's a subset of the 12 available notes that starts on a particular note. This is important to understand because there are several notes that contain exactly the same notes but start on different ones. This time, we'll be talking about major scales. And if you want to continue learning about minor scales, keys, and more, hit subscribe and like to make sure you don't miss the coming videos. So first off, let's listen to what a major scale sounds like. What you heard there was specifically the C major scale. It's called that because it starts on the C note. Here's the D major scale. And here's the G major scale. As you've probably noticed, all major scales follow the same pattern of whole and half steps. For instance, if we look at the C major scale, we start with the C, then go a whole step up to D, then another whole step up to D, then a half step up to an F, then a whole step up to G, again a whole step up to A, another whole step up to B, and finally a half step up to C, an octave above the one we started on. So the pattern is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's the formula for constructing any major scale. You'll notice that in the case of the C major scale, this gives us exactly the notes that aren't flat or sharp. These notes are called natural. That's because the naming of the notes is based on the C major scale for historical reasons I'm not going to go into here, but feel free to look it up if you're so inclined. You can see that the same pattern of whole and half steps applies to the D and G major scales below as well. We can create all of the 12 major scales using this pattern. We can visualize it by keeping the red circles in place and moving all of the notes one step to the left, wrapping around. So now we're looking at the C major scale, but if we shift all the notes 2 steps to the left, we now have the D major scale, the one with the 2 sharps. If we shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to the left, we get the G major scale, the one with the F sharp in it. Another way of visualizing it is if we put the 12 notes in a circle, like a clock, with the start of the scale at the top. At 12 o'clock. This is what the C major scale would look like. Now if we rotate counterclockwise 2 steps, we get to the D major scale, a few more steps, and we have the G major scale. Since we spent the last video talking about intervals, let's have a look at which intervals are in the major scale. We'll use the C major scale as our example. For each note in the scale, we'll look at the interval from the starting C note. So if C is the first note, so that's unison. We skip the C sharp, so our next note, D, is a major second. Skipping the D sharp, the E note is a major third. The F is a perfect fourth. The G is a perfect fifth. The A is a major sixth. The B is a major seventh. And finally, C is the octave. See what's going on here? The major scale seems to consist of the major intervals and the perfect intervals, or in other words, none of the minor intervals or the tritone. Okay, we made it this far, and you're probably wondering what all of this is good for. So major scales are extremely foundational. They're the basis of all Western music and occur across other musical traditions as well. And you can already use what you've learned here today to craft melodies or improvise over a piece of music. We're probably going to do at least one episode on keys in the series. But for now, you can just assume that if a song is in a certain key, for instance, the key of C major, you can just use the notes of the corresponding major scale, for instance, the C major scale, to improvise over it. So now I'm going to play a backing track in C major and do some simple improvisation over it using the C major scale. So on a piano, this means using only the white keys. So on the guitar, we often learn scales as movable patterns in boxes starting on certain frets. So for the C major scale, we're going to hang around the 5th fret. If you're learning to play an instrument, then learning the 12 major scales is one of the basic skills you'll have to master. There are tons of ready-made scale charts out there, but now you also know how they're constructed. The next video is going to cover minor scales. See you then!